Welcome, my child. Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. It's been 46 years since my last confession. 46 years? You're a bit late, aren't you? Hello and welcome to Just One More Watch. I should probably take this lot off before I end up with a one-way ticket to the bad place. I've never been a particularly spiritual person myself, but the idea of confession has always appealed. It means you can buy as many watches as you like one week, fess up on a Sunday, and start again on a Monday. Now, I am not actually a zinner, but I know a man who is, Gary from Birmingham. Gary has loaned me a bunch of watches, most recently the stunning looking Seiko Ginza dial, and he loaned me this Sinn 556i just before Christmas. I've been a long time admirer of the Sinn 556. Indeed, I nearly bought one. I came very, very close to buying one a couple of years ago. I'll tell you the reasons why I didn't end up pulling the trigger a bit later in the video. Now, most of the watches I review here are either brand new or nearly new. This one not so much. It has seen a little bit of wear and tear, so it'll be interesting to see where that wear and tear manifests itself. Gary bought it second hand, and I think, and Gary thinks, that he bought it with problems. There are two problems, well really it's one problem twice, with the bracelet. I'll show you it quite early on in the review. I'd be really interested to hear from other Sinn 556 owners to see if anyone else has experienced the same problem or it is in isolation. Alright, let's flip the camera and have a look at this Zinner. It comes in a box. While I'm getting into the box, let's talk money because, hey, it may not matter to you, but it bloody well matters to me. Aussie list price on these is $1,800 on the leather. It's another $300 if you want the H-Link bracelet like Gary has. USA price around $1,600, UK price around 1,200 quid. Now let's go back through those three prices again because they are different watches. The sharper amongst you will have already noticed. The Aussie one I'm showing you here, that's the 556i. That's the watch that Gary has. The USA price and the UK price are both 556A. I for indices, I'm guessing, A for Arabics. There's also a 556B which has a blue dial. I think they're all gorgeous. It is just a question of preference. They're identically spec'd anyway. And there is Gary's. Now some of you are already, I'm sure, thinking, meh, it's a very dull, black dialed 3-hand plus date for $1,600 US, Jody. Meanwhile, some other of you are licking your lips and I am in that number. This is just about perfect for me. It's that GADA style of watch, black dial, 3 hands, slightly smaller than 40, on a metal bracelet, genuinely having the capability of going anywhere and doing anything. I have an entire section in my State of the Collection video dedicated to GADA watches, all in that vein. Now Gary is a strap guy, which is just as well because this thing is an absolute strap monster. Black dial, relatively neutral looks. You can pretty much put anything at all on it and it's going to look sensational. Now I am going to focus my attentions on the bracelet today, but I have taken a bunch of footage with it on other straps that I'll filter in at various points to give you a look. It looks pretty fantastic on all of them. I genuinely don't know what you could put on this watch that wouldn't look good. And I think it is just about the perfect size as well. 38.5mm in diameter, only 11.2mm thick, with a really nice 45.4 lug to lug. Drilled lugs as well, meaning all those strap changes are even easier. 20mm lug width. There's a taper down to just under 18, back up to just under 20 at the clasp. Sized up for me, I added one extra link from where Gary had the bracelet. Weighs in at 145 grams. Now that is perhaps 8-10 grams heavier than I would have expected, given that this one is 38.5 and not 40 and doesn't have an additional bezel. I think that speaks to the overall build quality and construction of the watch, which feels rock solid. Case finish is really simple, satinized brushing throughout, meaning if you are wearing this one long term as a daily, it's not going to show the scratches. It's still going to pick up the scratches, but it's not going to show them. There's a few here on that bezel. There's a kind of big scuff on the other side and a chip here and there, but overall it doesn't look too bad for a watch that is already second hand. Now 316L stainless steel case, bezel, crown, full stainless steel bracelet. On other Sinn models they tegament them, so they use a hardening. This one being the baby of the range and the entry level model doesn't actually feature that, but the fact that it's satinized brushes will go some way to at least disguising those scratches, if not quite avoiding them. Flat sapphire crystal with dual anti-reflective coating, upper and lower. I will talk about that a bit later on. Nice little grippy guarded crown, 200 meters of water resistance, which is twice what I reckon a GADA watch needs, and it is signed there, and I already talked about the drilled lugs. Now the H-Link bracelet also has the same satinized brushing. There is a more complex 5-link kind of beads of rice style that is available, but it is even more expensive than this one. Female inverted mid-link of the N-link here, super compact lug to lug, plus that means small wristed ladies and gentlemen will have no problems at all with this one. Now the clasp, perhaps a little bulkier than it needs to be for a 38.5mm watch, and it is only a pressed upper with pressed fold over. It is milled on the underside with 3 holes of micro adjust and a feature that I will circle back to a bit later. But I did say that Gary was having a problem with the bracelet, or at least the same problem twice with the bracelet, so I better talk about that now. Now these links, H-links, all nice and smooth to the touch. Screw links with hex bolts, so Allen bolts on either side of them. Hence the 2 tiny Allen keys that Zinn supply to help you resize it. Now this is what they look like when removed from the bracelet. One long bit, one short bit, and the short bit simply screws into the long bit. However, 2 of Gary's links look like this, the short end having sheared off inside the long end, rendering them useless. One of them, the one in the middle, is still stuck inside the bracelet. He can't get it out and neither can I. Now I did find this Zinn branded thread locking adhesive inside the package that Gary sent me. I wonder perhaps if the first owner got a little bit heavy-handed with the thread locker and then managed to shear those screws when trying to remove them. Or is it a weakness? I don't know. You tell me. Do you own a 556? Have you owned one in the past? Did you have problems with screws? Gary spoke to our local supplier of Zinn watches here in Australia, who weren't particularly helpful by the sounds of it, told him he needed a whole new bracelet. I suspect if he contacts Zinn, they'll be able to supply him with 2 of those screw sets. Anyway, let's move on from that, blame it on the person that sold it to Gary on eBay, and talk about one of my favourite parts of this watch. That is the glass. Flat sapphire, as mentioned, with anti-reflective on the upper surface and the lower surface. I love anti-reflective and I love a good piece of crystal. It can make such a difference to a watch, and this is one good piece of crystal. It's a lovely gloss black dial, and this crystal really, really lets that shine. For example, check this shot outside at an angle. If this didn't have that double anti-reflective coating either side of the sapphire, you wouldn't be able to see the dial at all. As it is, it doesn't even look like there's a piece of glass there. Sometimes you think you can just reach out and touch the dial and the hands. That's how good this crystal is. I reckon top 5 crystals: Casio Oceanus 5000, my Omega Aquaterra, a few other really impressive pieces of glass, the May and Greenwich for example. I reckon this one is up there with the best of them. And the movement's not too bad either. It's a Swiss-made Solita SW200, which doesn't sound all that special considering this watch cost 2,000 Aussie, 1,600 USD, 1,200 quid, but it is at least a top grade version. So you get those nice blue screws, you get that custom Zinn rotor, and you get a little bit of extra decoration, all nicely visible through a sapphire case back. Considering this one has already had 2 owners and seen a fair bit of use, not a bad set of numbers, eh? Bang on, healthy amplitude, minimal beat error, 26 dual hacking and hand winding, 38-hour power reserve. And that dial and handset is just about perfection. Again, it looks pretty simple, it looks like you're not getting a lot for your cash, but what you are getting is done so well. Love that high gloss dial, everything's just printed on. This baton version has quite pronounced stick batons on the hour every hour, one of them slightly truncated to make way for the date complication at the 3 o'clock. The Arabic version, the A, does have the date squeezed down at the 4:30. Again, that's an aesthetic choice that you have to make if you are keen on one of these. What a handset as well, beautiful sword shaped hands, white against that black, incredibly legible, and blacked out in the centre so they appear to be floating above that liquid dial. And prospective micro-brand owners, that is how you do branding in my humble opinion. Zinn, the name, printed above the pinion, automatic with a K because it's a German watch printed beneath it, made in Germany, either side of the baton at 6, that is your lot. That's it on wrist. I've got a 7-inch wrist for your reference, and I love this, slightly smaller than 40. That 38.5mm I think just suits me so well. Does feel a little heavier than it might do at 145 grams, and I will come back to that slightly bulkier than necessary clasp in a minute or two in the moans and niggles section, but fabulous looking dial and handset and incredibly legible. Zinn as a brand were founded in the 1960s, 1961, by a chap called Helmut Zinn, who was a pilot and flying instructor. Hence why a lot of his watches still have that pilot look to them, hence why legibility is still a big factor. And outside natural light, that dual anti-reflective really comes into its own. You can see the dial, you can see the hands, and I love the satinized brush finishing throughout. A couple of nicks on this one, but it doesn't look any worse for it, I promise you. On wrist, again, looking good. A couple of things I haven't talked about so far are the colour match date wheel with white Arabics. Even the date is legible, and the fact that there is a fair degree of inherent anti-magnetism in the case design. Again, the fact that Helmut Zinn was a pilot, that filters back down into the watches even today. And the pocket shot to finish, I thought black and white watch, I would dress appropriately with this one. But again, much like the straps, the watch is so neutral, you can get away with anything you like with this, which suits the likes of me with my vast selection of brightly coloured t-shirts and foolishly patterned shorts. So if you like it so much, Jody, why didn't you buy one a couple of years ago when you got pretty close? Well, it's not an entirely moan and niggle free experience. As much as that anti-reflective upper coating is great, I hear it scratches off. There's no evidence of it on this particular model. On Gary's, maybe he hasn't treated it as roughly as I tend to treat my watches, but you start bashing it off, it doesn't look so good. I hear people then get the Scotch-Brite out and take the anti-reflective coating off the top to clean up the scratches effectively. That seems kind of counterproductive, doesn't it? And the lume is okay, but not fabulous. Painted dial rather than applied indices, maybe that's coming back to it. Even those big white hands don't look all that great at the end of the 20 minutes, do they? It's okay, but it could be much, much better. And then there's the clasp. It's okay, but it's not fantastic. That fold over feels really thin and a little bit cheap. And as discussed, the upper is pressed and not milled. And then there's this. What is that all about? Why is there a diver's extension on a pilot's watch? A little bit weird. It's not the worst one in the world. There's a bit of rattle there. But what's the point of it? It feels like the clasp belongs on a different watch. But the real reason that I personally didn't buy the Zinn 556 a couple of years ago was because I already own two killer black dial GADA watches at 38.5mm on bracelets. The Seiko used to come in well under 500 US dollars. The Omega was a present, and I dread to think how many dollars my wife spent on that one. Didn't really see the point in buying the Zinn, as beautiful as it is, to fit somewhere in the middle rather unnecessarily. But that's just me. You might not have a killer black dial GADA watch already in your collection, in which case this Zinn 556 really makes a strong case for itself, either in I or in A or in B, depending on your personal preference. The price tag might not look value packed on first impression because it is only a three-hander plus date after all, but once you dig a little deeper, I think once you look at the design, the fact that it's made in Germany, nice alternative to the entry-level Swiss luxury stuff, that movement being a top grade, the fabulous anti-reflective undercoating on the crystal, and that beautiful lustrous dial, fabulous legibility and a decent bracelet, as long as you don't go too trigger happy with that Loctite, I can understand why this little watch has such a big reputation. So there you have it, the Zinn 556i. Absolutely gorgeous and a killer all-rounder. If you like Zinns, the only other one that I've reviewed is the 104 from a few years ago. If you like this black dial GADA style, why not check out the Sarb 033. Thanks for watching, I'll see you soon.